Tonight, and those that are listening on the live, I'm going to have Emily Sensenig come up, and then I'll say a prayer for you and lead us away. Dear God, thank you for tonight. Thank you for the rain that we've been having the last couple of days. I pray for Emily tonight as she shares with us that you would just be with her and give her peace and comfort as she shares with everything that she's sharing about. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. All right, welcome everybody. And on the live, feels kind of funny talking to people that aren't here, but I'm glad you're listening in if you're listening. So my name is Emily Sensenig. I am a mom of 4 boys. My oldest is 8, and my baby is 5 months old. My husband and I attend Ephrata Bible Chapel, which is just down the street here, not too far. Amanda had asked me a while ago, back, I don't know, the spring or maybe even winter, if I would talk, and I said, I'm kind of busy right now, maybe in the summer, and I was kind of hoping she would forget about it. And then Dawn was like, no, you should come. So anyway, here I am. When I asked what I should talk about, they suggested I talk about losing my brother to cancer. So I actually haven't ever publicly spoken about this. So we'll see how it goes. I've shared some with friends, but actually like doing a whole talk, I never have done. I kind of felt like I should have my mom here to fill in details and to give her perspective too, because you know, I lost a brother, but she lost a son, and it's a different kind. They're both losses. It's a different kind of loss. But anyway, I will share my perspective and how losing him has affected me, how it's impacted my relationship with God, and a lot of other things. So it's been 9 years since he died, which seems so crazy because it seems like it was just a little bit ago, and yet not really that long. It doesn't make any sense unless you've lost someone you loved. Somehow time has a way of, it moves really fast and then it feels like it was just yesterday. So anyway, it was actually good for me to sit down and kind of go back and remember and to feel all the feelings again. And I kind of just move on with life, and I don't often like go back and remember what was that really like and how was I processing that. So it was good for me. So by the time I'm done tonight, I'd like you to know 2 things, or remember 2 things maybe. Pain and suffering are a normal part of life. Everyone is going to suffer in this life. But more importantly than that, there is a God, and our hope in him and our trust in him is the only way we get through pain. We can't survive any suffering without him. And he promises that one day all pain will be gone. And so that's the hope. That's the hope that gets you through. Anyway, so I am the oldest in my family, which means I was already married and out of the house when my brother was diagnosed. He was 16. My family, all my siblings at home, not me, they had gone to Florida for vacation. And his knee had been bothering him for a while, but they weren't really doing anything about it. He loved to play volleyball, and he had fallen, and so he just thought maybe he had bruised his knee, and it was no big deal. But it was consistently getting worse. And the pain meds, he was taking pain meds, it wasn't helping. So they had come home from vacation, and we were camping, I think. And I really noticed, like, he was generally like, let's go do stuff, and he just kind of was sitting around camping. He was just in a lot of pain. And so he thought maybe he tore something in his knee, or he wasn't sure. So I never considered the fact that it could be cancer. It never entered my mind. Like, I was like, oh, he probably did tear something in his knee, and so he was going to get it checked, like a MRI or a CAT scan. I don't remember which it was. It just never crossed my mind that it would be cancer. I was at work that day that his scans were, or maybe when they got the results. This is kind of why I wish my mom was here, because she would remember these little tiny details. I don't remember. I guess it doesn't really matter. But I was at work when I heard that when they did the scans, they found an actual lump, and it wasn't just like a torn muscle. And all of a sudden it hit me like, oh my goodness, it could be cancer. Lumps, like you don't have random lumps in your knee for no reason. And cancer, you know, Tyler's mom had cancer, and she had passed away when we were just after we graduated high school. So it was like 6 or so years before. And so I was familiar kind of with like the journey of cancer, but it was still far enough removed from me. You know, it wasn't my mom. It wasn't, I don't know. All of a sudden when it's somebody that you know and love, it's a whole different word. And then even the word just like, I don't know, it makes me almost sick on the stomach. I actually wrote that down here. As soon as there's like a knot in your stomach and a lump in your throat and it just doesn't go away. And I think I had that knot in my stomach for the next 2 years. A lot of like the timeline of his sickness kind of is fuzzy to me. They told us when he was diagnosed, it was osteosarcoma, which is not a bone cancer, it's where a tumor grows out of the bone. So it wasn't like in his bone marrow, it was like an actual mushroom shape coming out of his knee bone. And they said, oh, it's like a 70% chance survival rate. And you know, when now I feel a little jaded, or a little maybe cynical, and I don't think it's a good thing. But when you're first like in that journey, like, oh, 70%, oh, that's wonderful. You know, he'll be fine. Like, that's a great survival rate. And I think we just kind of latched onto that hope, like, he'll be fine. Like, he's 16, he's young and healthy, and he'll do the chemo, and then he'll be on his way again. So he started chemo. They wanted to shrink the tumor in his knee first before they did a surgery to remove whatever the chemo didn't get. And so they did that for a while, and then he had a knee surgery. And once they opened it up and got in there, they realized it was more involved than they thought. So they ended up taking like his entire kneecap and some of the bone down his leg and some muscle tissue. It was just a big surgery, and it was rough. So he had a big long scar, and it was open and ugly. And I remember when I first saw his leg after like they unwrapped it and stuff, I was like, there is no way he's gonna walk on that again. It was so like, because they took muscle, his leg was skinnier and it was just open and oozing, and I was like, oh my goodness, he's never gonna walk on that. So he had that surgery in the fall of his junior year of high school, maybe, I think. And then it went until spring. He kind of limped along when he had crutches. He couldn't put any weight on it. We're just kind of waiting for it to heal. They couldn't do chemo. They didn't want to do chemo while it was still healing, because chemo would keep the leg from healing up. So they wanted to let it heal, but you can't wait that long to stop chemo or the cancer will spread. It was just a mess of a time. But in the spring, in April, I was at a friend's birthday party, and my sister called, and she was like, hey, he has an infection in his knee, and he's up at Hershey, and the doctors are saying they're going to have to amputate. And yeah, I don't know. I left the birthday party. I remember I was kind of like in shock. And I drove all the way up to Hershey. I was in Honeybrook, so it's a far drive. And I wanted to go see him, and it was late at night. But I was driving, I'm like, what do you say? What am I going to say when I get there to my brother? Like, no 17-year-old who loves life and loves sports and you know, has great plans for the future, how do you process losing a leg? Like, yeah. And I remember I kind of walked in the room, and I was like, I don't know what to say. Like, I'm sorry, I feel bad. He was so, I don't know what the word is, resigned, kind of, like not angry. He was just like, well, it is what it is, and you know, this is what we got to do, and I don't know. I think it was kind of at that point in my journey that I really got angry at God. Like it didn't seem fair before, like that a teenager should have cancer. Like, that's not fair. And I was kind of, I don't know, whatever about that, but like really angry. I remember, you know, saying to God on the way up to the hospital, like, you gave him cancer, or I don't know if I actually said that, but you let him have cancer, and now this, like, couldn't you at least make it easier for him? Or, you know, the enemy started whispering in my ear, you know, God doesn't really care about you. He doesn't really love you. He doesn't really love your brother. You know, if he did, he wouldn't be making you go through all this. And if God really loved you, he would heal your brother. And just like these lies, like, and I was listening when I was listening to the enemy's lies. And I was like, yeah, that's right. God doesn't love me and he doesn't care. I still believed somehow that, or somewhere in me, that God had the power to heal him. So it's not like I was saying, I don't even believe in God anymore. And in a way, I think it might have been easier. It might have been easier if I had been at that point, because then I'd be just like, whatever, moving on with God. But to still believe that he could heal him and he was choosing not to felt so cruel. Like, you're the only, I was like, God, you're the only person who could heal him, and you're not. And that's why. And I don't know. So that thought kind of festered in my mind for months, maybe years. I'll come back to that at the end. But that was kind of the turning point, like his amputation, where I really felt, starting to feel like this is God's fault. So he continued chemo. They had the amputation. He hopped around on crutches. And he had a lot of like phantom pain and just everything that goes with losing a limb. They got him a prosthetic leg. He hated it. He did not. He's like, I would rather just be on crutches the rest of my life than try to learn how to use this prosthetic leg, because they amputated like above the knee. So they had to have, like, he said it was heavy and cumbersome. It's just awkward. He didn't like it. So he kept doing chemo throughout that junior year. And then, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Wait. So it was really hard for me to watch him have to give things up. I don't know if it's because I'm the oldest and I just felt like I needed to protect him, or I don't know. But like giving up, you know, volleyball. He played volleyball on one leg. I have no idea how. And he kind of hopped around. But he gave up a lot of stuff because of cancer. He was sick, missed a lot of school. He loved school. And even when he was there, like, chemo just makes your brain foggy. So he would try to do homework in the hospital and he just couldn't think. And so I felt so bad. But he had a really core group of friends. And, you know, some teenagers, when they see someone sick or something unusual, they would like pull a leg. But his group of friends was just, they were angels. They were so wonderful. They never treated him differently because of his cancer. They did things with him on the weekends. They invited him to all the things. They were such a huge support to him. They came to visit in the hospital. He never would have made it through without them. They were so fantastic. And he was so positive and upbeat. He never complained. And he had a lot of pain. And he's like, what does complaining about it do? And he just, he was really upbeat about life. So the summer between his junior and senior year of high school, they did the scans and they said, there's no more cancer. And we were just ecstatic. I was like, yes, okay. And I'm sure he was feeling this too. Like, now we're getting on with life. Cancer, I did that. It was a journey. It was a process. Lost my leg. But I am moving on. And it was like 2 months of just wonderful. He had a big party celebrating being cancer-free and all kinds of stuff like that. And then like the month school started, I think his senior year, a new spot showed up on his scans in his lungs. And they had told us at the beginning, if it ever metastasizes, which is like moves to a different part of your body, his survival chances will go way down. And so when they said it was in his lungs, they were like, it's a much smaller chance of survival now. It was like a punch in the gut. It still makes me sick on the stomach thinking about it, actually. I don't remember which month of his senior year it was. It was in the fall that they were like, the chemo isn't working, the cancer is spreading, and there's nothing else we can do. this is terminal now, he will die from this. And even then, I think I was kind of, I don't know what the word is, like, in denial. I'm like, he's fine. And he seemed fine. He was still able to do things he was doing. He was still getting chemo, but they changed it to a pill, and it didn't make him as sick. And he fought really hard that year. He lived so much life his senior year of high school. He was all like on quiz team, what Bible quizzing is. It's like memorizing chapters of the Bible, and he was on gospel team, like singing and on like programs and stuff. He did a lot that year. But he also had 2 lung surgeries that year, and they were so painful because they like split his ribs apart to get like a drainage tube in, and it was incredibly painful. They took a bunch of cancer out, and then something filled up again. They did another one. They took most of his one lung, so he like the last couple months of his life he really struggled to breathe because he only had one lung. So somehow I just thought he would survive. I don't know. I assumed that his will to live, which he had an enormous will to live, I just assumed that would be enough to somehow keep him alive. But his body began failing, and we could tell things were going downhill. And they had told us that he would have a couple months, and that was like in October, and it was, March and April, and he was still going, and I was like, oh, maybe he will survive longer than they think. But it was April, and I remember they had like a class party, and I was a teacher at Taylor Hill at the time, so I was there as a teacher, and I couldn't find him. I would kind of keep an eye on him in places to see if he was getting overwhelmed or sick, and see if there was anything I could do. I looked all around, I couldn't find him, and checked around the school to see if he was like laying down somewhere, because sometimes if he got sick he would just find a corner and lay down. I couldn't find him. It was like half an hour. I was starting to get a little worried, and he finally came out of the bathroom and said, I just had a really, really bad nosebleed, and he couldn't get his nose to stop bleeding, and he had those a lot. It was something with his blood clotting factors and the chemo, and I don't know. They went to the hospital, I think, then the next day, but that was the last night that he ever walked. And I wish I would have known that then. I mean, I don't know if it would have made a difference, but somehow that would be significant, I think. It was right at his 18th birthday, like just maybe the week of his 18th birthday was the last week he walked, and after that he was in a wheelchair. So his body just kept failing. More and more things stopped working. And my mom, she's such a saint. She cared for him it was like a month that he was in a wheelchair before he died. She cared for him so well during that month. It was back to like baby, when he was a baby again. I can't imagine, I care for my baby now, but like to have a teenager with the capabilities of a baby and have to care for them, she was amazing. So like the last week of his life, he lived in the hospital. He was really struggling to breathe, and so he wasn't getting enough oxygen to his brain, and he was starting to like hallucinate kind of, or like he was getting a little foggy and not making sense or whatever. So he went to the hospital, but the morning he went to the hospital, Mom said he woke up and was like, I'm making breakfast for you this morning for my mom. And she was like, he's in a wheelchair, and he got the electric skillet out and set it up on the table and made her eggs and I don't know what I made her breakfast before they went to the hospital. But that's just how he was. That's just who he was. So he needed oxygen, and he had some oxygen at home, but it wasn't enough. He needed like the high flow from the hospital because he couldn't breathe. Anyway, so we slept up at the hospital. I don't know, maybe 2 nights that week. One evening, they said, "Oh, we think maybe this is going to be it. Everybody come to the hospital." So we all went up, and then he was still okay. So my whole family slept there in the hospital that night. That was crazy. We just kind of slept on the floor. They gave us their biggest room, which was really nice. And Hershey is such an amazing hospital for kids. Like their pediatric cancer ward is just phenomenal. Anyway, so my grandma was on the end of her life too at this exact same time, and she died Saturday morning. We got the call. We were at the hospital with my brother, and we got the call that she had died, and my parents left to go plan her funeral. It was right around lunchtime, I think. They were going to go over, all the siblings were getting together to plan her funeral. And I didn't know this at the time, but my mom said, she whispered to him before she left, "You may go if you want to." So my parents left, and it was just like my siblings and I and Tyler there. And Josh wasn't like responding anymore at that point. He was sitting on his chair, but he was unconscious. They had him on really high pain meds because they didn't want him to be uncomfortable. And so my siblings and I were kind of talking, and I mean, what do you do? You're sitting in a room with your brother who's about to die. But anyway, we were talking about something not even important. And I noticed that his breathing was getting farther and farther apart. Like he would take a breath, and then it would be a little bit, and then he would take another breath, and I was like, oh. And so I'm kind of keeping an eye on it. And then the nurse came in, she's like, they had him hooked up to all this stuff, and they could see out on their screens, like his numbers were dropping, his blood pressure was dropping, and his heart rate was dropping. And she said it's not going to be very long anymore. So I'm like, oh dear, I gotta call my mom. And I'm like, Mom, the nurse said it's not going to be long, you need to come back. So my poor mom, on the way to plan her mom's funeral, they turned around, but they didn't make it back in time. His breathing was getting farther and farther apart, and I felt kind of like, as the oldest in the family, like I should do something. Like I'm supposed to be the responsible one. I was the only one who was, married and older, and the rest were all teenagers. So his mouth was really dry, and so like we dipped. It's like a sponge kind of thing. You put it in their mouth. So I kind of like wetted his mouth, and I was like, "You may go if you want to," and I was like, we'll see you soon. Sorry. And then he cried like one tear, and I wiped it away for him. And then he took one more breath, and then he stopped. And I kind of stood there, and I was like, is he gonna breathe again? And he never did. It's the weirdest feeling. Like, I don't know if you've ever been there when someone dies. I've been there twice. I was there when Tyler's mom, Sandy, died, and then my brother. And I think you feel like eternity is just like right there. Like 1 second he was there and he was breathing, and like just like that, he just wasn't. Like, he was in our presence, and then we blinked and he was in God's presence. And it felt like heaven was just right there. I'm crying now, but I did not cry then. I didn't know what I was going to do when he died. Like, during the time that he had been sick, I was like, I wonder what it's going to be like when he dies. What am I going to do? I thought maybe I'm just going to burst into tears. And I'm standing there in the hospital, I'm looking at him, I'm like, he died. Like, he is not here. And I didn't cry at all. I went and found my little sister. She was it was like a double room. They had like a sitting room with a sofa connected to his bedroom, which was so nice because there were so many of us. And she was over there, and I went and told her, I was like, hey, Josh died. And she was like, okay. She was 6, or 5 or 6, I don't remember. Anyway, and I was waiting for my parents to get back, and then my parents came back, and I felt really bad that my parents didn't get to be there to, say goodbye. But it was kind of, someone said later, and it's true, it's almost like he did that as a gift. that they didn't have to be there to see it. It was in his own way of, I don't know. Or maybe it was because my mom, gave him permission before she left. She said goodbye and said it's okay. So anyway, she told me later, she's like, I didn't really mean it though. She said, I told him it was okay if he could go, but I didn't really mean it. But anyway, so I think what I felt the most in that moment was just relief. It had been such a long 2 years, and I was even outside of it. Like, I didn't live with him every day, and I didn't take him to all his appointments, and so I'm sure it was a relief for other people too. But watching him suffer was so difficult, and watching everything that the cancer had taken from him, and so it was almost like, oh, at least now he's happy. At least now he has 2 legs again, and at least now he doesn't have cancer. Now he can breathe again. So in a way, it was right in that moment. It was just like a kind of like a relief. I hated the powerless feeling that I had in his whole story. Like, I was teaching at the time of his cancer. I was teaching at Terry Hill where he was going to school, so I would see him. It's in your face all the time, and I cried so much in the bathroom that year. I don't really like crying in front of people. I don't know if it's because it makes me feel weak or out of control, or I don't know. I felt like I really needed to be strong because I was the oldest, and I knew how much it was like weighing on my parents, and I felt like my younger siblings didn't know what to do with it. So like somebody needed to be able to keep it together, and I thought that had to be me. And my mom is a feeler. She's just like the hugest heart you ever knew, and she was so unashamed of her emotions. She cried all the time, and to anyone who would ask her, like complete strangers, and she would just break down. She just felt all the feelings, and I envied that in her in a way, because people are just drawn to that vulnerability. She has a great group of friends, and they surrounded her too. She gave us a huge gift, and it taught me so much about grief watching her. It gave us permission to feel too. If it was okay for my mom to just cry and feel and grieve openly, then it was okay for me too. It was I realize it now more than I did then, what a gift it was, watching her model how to grieve well. She allowed people to see her pain, and it helped in her healing. I wish I could say I've learned from her and I do the same, but I'm still working on that. At the time, I couldn't really talk about it at all, or to really describe my feelings, even to Tyler. I just didn't know how to put into words what I was processing. It hurt too much to feel, and I remember being like, you know what, it hurts. It just hurts too much. I'm not going to feel anything at all, and I shut down all my emotions, not just the pain, not just the negative, not just the grief. I just didn't feel anything. I felt so numb. Like I couldn't feel happy or sad or disappointed or excited or anything. I didn't feel anything. I just didn't want to hurt, so I wouldn't let myself feel anything at all. But after a while, and I don't know when the switch was, I wish I could say there was this one thing that made me realize what was going on. But I began to realize that, when you shut yourself off from the pain and you're trying to protect yourself, you're also shutting yourself off from joy. And I wasn't feeling anything. And I didn't want to live like that. I didn't want to live the rest of my life in this like numb state. And so it occurred to me somewhere along the line that if I was ever going to be happy again, I was going to have to let myself feel the pain and what it was like. And I didn't do it perfectly. I don't do it perfectly. In fact, when I sat down to write this, I was like, I kept wanting to stop. I'd start typing, and then I was like, I cannot remember that. I just don't want to go back. I don't want to remember what that was like. I don't want that sick feeling in my stomach again. But we have to feel all the things in order to feel anything at all. And it hurts because we loved, and that's a good thing. If it didn't hurt, hurt means that you loved. And so that's okay. So I mentioned before that I was really angry with God. I really was. Prior to this, I hadn't had any real testing of my faith in a good God. I just always believed, God is good and he loves us. And this kind of rocked me. Sometimes I thought it would shatter my faith altogether. C.S. Lewis calls it the dark night of the soul, and I think that's what it was. That's how I would call it. I couldn't pray. I did not want to. I couldn't sing. I didn't want to, and I love to sing, but I didn't believe any of the words I was in the songs. I was like, I can't sing this. I don't mean this. I felt so unseen by God. I felt like God had just kind of turned his back and was like, hey, you guys just figure it out down there, and that he was far away and just uncaring about the whole situation. Until one night when God just showed up in the most amazing way. And I've told this story in Sunday school a few times, so maybe you've heard me say it, but Tyler was in college at the time, and he was doing like clinical rotations where they would go to hospitals. And he was in York, I think. So he worked till 11, then it was, 12 or 12:30 till he got home. So he was gone. So one night I decided to go to Walmart. I don't know if I needed groceries. I don't know if I was just shopping to pass the time. I don't remember. But when I did my shopping and I got back out to my car, I realized I had locked my keys in. Looking back, I have no idea how I did that. My brain was so foggy at the time, maybe, I don't know. I had locked my keys in my car and my phone. I didn't have my phone. And now looking back, I think all the things I could have done. Like, why didn't I just go to the customer service and ask to use a telephone? Or why didn't I just find somebody? I never thought of it at the time. So I'm standing there. What am I going to do? It's 9 o'clock-ish at night. Tyler, I can't, he's in York. And, this was effort at Walmart, and my parents are in Morgantown, which is like half an hour. I'm not making them run at this time of night. And so I'm like, I can figure this out by myself, which is what my personality normally does. I will power my way through this, and we will figure this out. So I remember someone saying, you can unlock a car door with a wire hanger. Perfect. Back into Walmart, see if they have wire hangers. Sure enough, they did. I don't even know if they still sell wire hangers, but they did then. Bought a pack of wire hangers, and I'm out there bending it and trying to shove it in my window to hit the unlock button. And I worked and worked and worked. And I couldn't get out to unlock it. And I stood there in that parking lot, and I didn't scream out loud. But in my heart, I screamed at God. I was so angry. I was like, am I not going through enough already? Why can't you help me get this door unlocked? This is such a small thing. Like, I'm dealing with this cancer and all you would need to do is make this wire, hit that button. Like, why can't you help me? Do you even see me? Do you know what's going on? Do you know where I am? Do you even care? And I was looking down at the ground. I remember how I was standing even beside my car. And I looked up, and I was at the one end of Walmart, and all the way across the parking lot going into the grocery end, and it was Nolan, which is my father-in-law. He was walking into Walmart. It's like 9:30 at night. And I ran over to him and I said, hey, I locked my keys in my car. Can you drive me home? And we lived at Reamstown at the time, so it wasn't far. And he's like, yeah, I'll take you home. And I was like, we'll just come back and get my car, tomorrow when Tyler's home. And we're driving home. And on the way home, he said that he had been getting ready to go to bed. And he was thinking about packing his lunch for the next day for work. And he really wanted bananas. And so at 9:30 at night, he decided to go to Walmart and buy bananas. At the perfect time for God to use him to answer my prayer. And it was like God said, you know what? I see you. I know where you are in that Walmart parking lot, and I will, even before you prayed, because he was walking in when I prayed, so God had already been orchestrating that all before. Even before you prayed, I put it in his heart to want bananas, and I made him want to go to Walmart. I know where you are, I know what's going on, and I care about you. And it reminded me of that verse. It's in Exodus, and then I think either Stephen or somebody used it in a sermon in Acts, but where God says to Moses, I have seen the affliction of my people in Egypt, and I have heard their cries, and I have come down to save them. And God was like, I have seen you, I have heard you, and I'm coming to save you. And he sent my father-in-law to show me how much he cared. And so I think that was kind of the beginning of the healing for me in my relationship with God. It didn't happen overnight, but I think at that point my heart kind of softened towards God again. I was like, oh, okay, you really do care. So I've learned some things along the way. I realized I was angry at God for not taking away my suffering when in fact he never promised that he would. Even lots of times in the Bible it says, in this world you will have trouble, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. Or peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. He doesn't promise that our lives are going to be suffering and pain free. He promises he will be with us. And so I was angry at him, but he had never promised that I was going to have an easy life. I was expecting things that were never promised to me. But what did he promise? Oh my goodness, he promised he would never leave us. He promised his strength would be perfect in our weakness. He promised that his grace would be enough for us. And most importantly, he promises one day he's going to make everything right that is wrong. And, one day there's not going to be any pain or sickness or crying or death. That's a promise. And I also came to realize that God allows suffering for reasons we may never understand. Somehow, I think humans, we want to make sense of it somehow. If I could just see what the purpose of this pain is, then it'll give me enough gumption to get through it somehow. If I just know what I'm supposed to learn or how this is, then somehow it'll make it seem worthwhile. We just want to figure it out for some reason. But sometimes we don't ever see the reason. And maybe it's just because we live in a broken world. Maybe suffering is just because this world is cursed. Sometimes maybe we do see, but sometimes we might not. Maybe God allows us to suffer because it forces us to make a decision about him. Do I really believe or don't I? It kind of pushes you up against a wall and you're like, do I really believe everything that I've been taught about God or don't I? Maybe he wants to show us who he really is in our suffering, in the middle of it. Do I have it all figured out? No. But somewhere along the way, my anger towards God ended. And I can't put a time or a place on it. But somewhere along the line, that really intense anger faded. And I came to a place where I can sing a worship song again and I can really mean it. And God has been faithful, which means he does not give up. He did not give up on me when I turned away from him. He stayed there. He welcomed me back when I came back. So how does all this affect me now? I don't actually think about it very often, and that's why this was really good to have to go back and remember. There'll be occasions where I think of something funny and I'll be like, oh, I should, Josh would think that's funny, or I see, his favorite kind. They make, one time he really loves Sour Patch Kids, and I saw that some place had like a Sour Patch Kid slushie, and I was like, oh, Josh would love one of these slushies, like little things like that. But I can think of it more now as happy things, and it's not as much of a, I don't know, take your breath away pain. It's more kind of like a dull ache. It gave me a new heart of compassion for people who suffer. Sometimes in our culture, I think we just expect people to bounce back after a loss. Like, just get over it. It's been how many months? Move on. We don't say that, but we kind of expect that. You should be back to teaching Sunday school and back to doing all the things you did before. And we don't give people enough space to really grieve. I don't know if we grieve very well. Grief is a really long process. It's not something that happens in a few weeks or a few months. Like it's years to. It's a whole thing, and everyone grieves differently. So Some people, they just want to talk about how they're feeling and the person who passed, and they just want to share. And other people just want to be left alone, and they don't want that. They don't want people always asking them, so how are you? So how are you? You know, it really varies. Some people want to, you know, keep all the sentimental items. I want to keep this, and I want to keep his wallet, and I want to keep. And other people are like, I don't want anything at all. You know, so some of my siblings wanted his sweatshirts to wear, and some of my other siblings were like, absolutely not. I would not wear his sweatshirt. I don't want that visual. No. And so everyone just grieves differently, and that's okay. And we need to give people space to grieve in the way that they grieve, and not put pressure on them to grieve a certain way. I wish we could make more space for lamenting, for people to say, I am so angry and at God, and no one would be shocked. And people could just say, that's an okay place to be, and you will get through this, and just give them space to be honest. Also, one way it affected me is it made me long for heaven a lot more. Before this, I don't know, you know, I was like, yes, heaven is a wonderful place, and you read all that in the Bible, but when you know someone there, it changes things. I look forward to heaven now. And the more people I know that go, the more that I long for it. I learned that God can handle our honesty. It does not shock him when we rage at him. We can tell him how we really feel. He doesn't condemn us for those emotions. In fact, he meets us there. And I also learned that the best and deepest relationships are formed when you're honest. And you allow people into your pain and allow God to use them to bring healing to you. But you never get that if you keep it all stuck inside. So have I learned all these things perfectly? No. But those are some things I've learned along the way. Anyway, I think that's about it. I don't know how long I went. But anyway, I hope something was helpful or interesting. But yeah, that's it.
Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Was he not on the senior trip when that?
No.
She keeps moving the table.
I know.
She's getting off camera.
He was really hoping to go on senior trip. So the seniors at Terry Hill go to Grenada, or they don't anymore, but they did then. But he was just not well enough. His oncologist was like, it's just too risky. He's too far away. What if something goes wrong? And they really discouraged him. No, you shouldn't go. And he was really, really disappointed. But no, he was not on the trip where Jared drowned. And he felt really bad about that too. Like, he's like, I wish I could be there with my class as they grieved together. And I remember asking him about it one time. He's like, it was just the most weird feeling. He said, I always thought I was going to be the first one to die. He's like, I'm the one with cancer. I'm the one dying. He's like, everyone else is fine. And then he's like, I wasn't the first one to die. And it was a really weird feeling for him. I'm sure it was. But then he died, it was like 3 weeks later, I think. 20-some days. It was really close, yeah. He died the day after his class graduated high school. So he couldn't go to graduation, obviously, because he was in the hospital. But it was like, they graduated Friday night and then he died Saturday. Any other questions or comments?